Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is the pregame show, the OBR pregame show, getting you ready for Browns Bengals part D. The matchup in Cincinnati today, or Kentucky, whatever you want to call it. I am here with my esteemed panel. The big boss man, Barry McBride, is here with us. And, of course, Jack Duffin from across the pond joining us. And we may have others popping in as well as we prepare you for our Week 16 battle with the Bengals. And much to discuss. Lots going on with the Browns this week as 2025 has become a hot topic already, which, is only fair, I think. Let's go around real quickly. Barry, what's going on? How you feeling about the game today? Things that you'll be focused on mainly.
Well, how do I feel about the game? I feel that The Browns should hopefully look good, but I am not emotionally invested in whether or not they win. To be quite honest with you, I am
Yeah.
after watching college football yesterday, very emotionally invested in their potential draft picks. Particularly enamored with Abdul Carter after watching Penn State yesterday. But that aside, I have zero expectations for this game, to be honest with you, Brad. I do not have high expectations for a display on the part of Dorian Thompson Robinson, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of him, over the last couple of years. I do not expect anything revelatory today. I expect a solid performance by the Cleveland Browns defense, but my expectations are not high, and therefore I will likely not be overly disappointed today.
Okay. Sounds good. I like that. Jack, what are you looking for, brother?
I'm looking for the Browns to ideally move to either fifth or magically third in the draft order after today's game.
Knew that was
Um,
coming. Yeah.
so I have very little interest in the overall result. I'm much more interested in individual performances.
Yes.
There's guys like Jordan Hicks has been great this season. Doesn't mean anything to me if he plays well again today. Even if he struggles today, doesn't mean anything. Whereas there's about 5 or 6 guys that are projected starters that can have a significant impact. And by all means, we can go into that across the show, but it's one that those are what I'm much more interested in.
Yeah, individual. We're in the evaluation period here of the 2024 season. Listen, thank you all for joining the show. I appreciate you all in the chat interacting with us. It means a great deal to us. Make sure you hit like and subscribe to the notification bell so you know every time we go live with one of our daily shows. We're trying to pack the airwaves with our content on the YouTube channel. And a like and a subscribe goes a long ways. So we appreciate that. And it doesn't cost you a cent. So there you go. If you're watching over on Twitter, hop on over to youtube.com/orange and brown report and join us over here in this chat room if you feel so inclined. How much does Njoku play? Who's DTR's top target say? Listen, DTR. I'm intrigued. I agree with you, Barry. We've seen. I feel like we have a general idea of who DTR is, right? But at the same time, he's made 3 starts, and that's nowhere near enough to evaluate a player in the NFL. I mean, these rookies that get drafted in the first round, this is a 5th round pick, get drafted in the first round sometimes take a couple years to find their footing. So I'm anxious to see him get a start where he had the full week of preparation and he had a game plan for him. That's only happened one time in the Broncos game, and he got hurt, and he looked pretty good up to that point. So, I don't expect magic or anything, but I want to see how he does, and I'm keeping an open mind about DTR. I don't have illusions of him being anything more than a backup for the Browns long term, but I still would like to see what he can offer today. His top target, I would assume that I think you'd be out of your mind not to be looking to Judy often in this one. I would normally say Cedric Tillman since they played high school ball together, but Cedric Tillman is out again, guys. This is, I don't know how many weeks in a row, but let's go over the inactives real quick. Jameis Winston is your emergency quarterback because his shoulder is hurt. Shelby Harris is inactive. Cedric Tillman still out with a concussion. Brendan Bates, Chigozie Anusium, Brendan Bates, I already said Brendan Bates, Cameron Thomas, Khalif Halassier, Martin Emerson, and David Njoku will play today. Mike Hall will get the start, which is fun because he has looked fantastic so far. So, real quickly, thoughts on Cedric Tillman still missing time with this concussion, Barry? Should we be concerned?
Well, I think you need to be concerned anytime, a player's out for this amount of time with a head injury. You need to be concerned for the player himself, right? Obviously, but he's been practicing, so one assumes that he's relatively close to returning. But you really wanted to see more of Tillman this year, just from the perspective to see him emerging, which it seemed like he was. But back to your comment on Jerry Jeudy. One of the things that happened when we went from Watson to Winston was that Jerry Jeudy suddenly emerged, right?
Yeah.
And if DTR isn't able to find him with the frequency and the effectiveness that Winston did when he was quarterback, what does that say about DTR, right? So you definitely want to take a look at the number of targets and receptions that Jeudy gets today and sort of use that as a measuring stick for how effective DTR is, because we know that Jeudy can get free. We know that the Bengals secondary isn't necessarily all that. And as a result, like I said, it's a measuring stick for DTR today, in my opinion.
Yeah. Where are you at with DTR in the grand scheme of things, Jack?
So I don't think put the whole start in 2025 to one side. The question we need to answer is he capable of being the backup in 2025? Because we don't know that answer yet. It could be one where if he doesn't work out, is it one that we get a Jacoby Brissett or someone like that? It might be spending 3, 4, 5 mil and going, actually, let's get someone that we know can do a job and step in. Or it might be going, let's swing for someone. It could be a Trey Lance. It could be a Zach Wilson and go, let's get someone that could they be the next sort of breakout candidate who was formerly highly drafted? Or could it be one we go, let's just get a Josh Dobbs potentially, who we know what Josh Dobbs is, steady pair of hands, but allow him and DTR to battle it out, and whoever wins that backup job, fine. It's just options. But we might know within 2 games that he is just QB3 on the depth chart next offseason, and he's then going to get replaced by a draft pick. He's a camp body. And that's a question that we don't know. My view is that I'm not sure he's the guy, but let's find out. And that's well worth doing when you get to the end of the season. And there's quite a few guys that they've just, let's throw them in there. Let's see what we've got.
Do you think at any point? Go ahead, Barry.
I'm sorry, Brad. This has just been bugging me a little bit. I mean, don't you guys think that this team takes a swing on a draft pick in 2025, in the 2025 draft? Because if they do, then there's no room for a DTR on this team, right? You've got Watson taking up a spot for, he just has to. You're bringing in a Cousins or a Darnold or someone like that. You think he can actually win you some games in 2025. And if you take a swing on a draft pick, maybe a Dylan Gabriel's available to you, late in the third or, something like that where you think he's a good value, then there's just no room for DTR, right?
It's why the Achilles injury might actually help the Browns. Because the current trajectory and where that was in the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts the season on the PUP list. And if he starts the season on the PUP list, that's where you can squeeze that other one in. If it wasn't the case, then you're talking about, do you just run with 52 and effectively, yes, you're carrying a 4th roster spot with Watson and it's a nightmare, but it is what it is. They might sit there and have a conversation with Watson's agent and go, look, your rehab's not going to be good enough. You're going to miss the first 4 games of the season because you're going to be on PUP regardless. Do you want to just spend the whole season there, fully rehab, go and sort of develop and set yourself up for 2026? We're going to cut you on the second day of the league year in 2026. Go and sign with the team then and put you in a great spot. And I think that's probably where they'll go. But DTR, he's got to prove he's the backup or he's on the outside looking in come week 18, after week 18.
Yeah. I think that you make a valid point, Barry, that they will take some. But I think that It depends on where, right? Like, so, where are they taking this quarterback? Are they taking him as a future starter? Or are they taking him as another flyer-esque mid-round, take a swing type guy? Because if it's a take a swing type guy in the middle rounds, then I think you have to let these two compete. And to Jack's point, I think you can keep Watson away long enough to let DTR at least be the third quarterback, practicing, right? I guess if he's on the PUP list, and hopefully he just stays there. So personally, yeah, so I think it's interesting. Let's go there real quick, because this is the hot topic right now, Jack. The Kirk Cousins thing has opened wide open, with Cousins potentially, he's going to be leaving now that they've made the move to Michael Penix Jr. The question is, with his no trade clause, will he force himself to be cut? If he does, it does create the Russell Wilson situation where the offset language in his contract could allow the Browns or any other team to basically get him on the cheap, right? Like the veterans minimum. So that brings up two questions, guys. Is Kirk Cousins A, good enough, and B, would he be willing to come to Cleveland? I think if it's his choice. And then thirdly, now I think we have to account for Myles Garrett's comments just the other day. Is it good enough for Myles? What do you think, Barry?
I was of the opinion that, we're rolling out hope again. Hope that Kirk Cousins was sort of going through a 1-year dip in his career. But, Pete linked a film analysis by Kurt Warner, yesterday on the water cooler, which I looked at. And it really gave me the first indication that Cousins' problems this year may have been systemic, with the offensive system that the Atlanta Falcons were using. I was reading a lot of blogs and a lot of news articles from Atlanta, which were really pointing the finger at Kirk Cousins, right? That it was his problem coming back from the Achilles. He was patting the ball too long. Warner's analysis really was pointing the finger at the system, right? Which indicated to me that this might be fixable on Stefanski's part. So I'm just sort of reevaluating it a little bit, thinking that it may not be a Kirk Cousins issue, that it might be something that Stefanski could fix this year. So I'm sort of reevaluating that a little bit in terms of whether Kirk Cousins could come in here and add value. On the question of whether he would pick Cleveland, that is a lot more interesting, right? Cleveland needs to fix its offensive line issues if they want to get Kirk Cousins here. I think the wide receiver situation is pretty good. Njoku is very appealing to a player like Cousins, I would imagine. But they got to get the offensive line problems fixed. Otherwise, if San Francisco, for example, were to chase Cousins, I think that would be a more appealing situation for him.
Interesting. Are you still under the impression, though, that they are going to sign Purdy to a long-term deal? I am. So we'll see, I guess. Jack, I know this is your guy. This is the dream scenario for you, right? So lay it out for me, brother.
Yeah, so lots of people are sat there going, do I want Darnold and do I want Cousins? And that's just not the options on the table. The options is, do you want Darnold or do you want Kirk Cousins and 39 million extra in free agency investment? And that's where this decision should be viewed, because people try and look at stuff in silos and it just doesn't live in silos. If you're having to give 40 million to Darnold and you're giving 1.255 million to Cousins, that's a really tangible proposition. And it's a 1-year thing. We're talking about a guy that he came off an injury last offseason. I fully agree. Is the scheme really the best for him? Who knows? We know he fixed with Kevin Stefanski. There's good weapons around him in Cleveland. They can easily upgrade the offensive line. And yeah, Kirk Cousins, is he going to be a top 8 quarterback next year? No. there's no reason he isn't like at 16th, middle of the road guy. That's good enough to get you to the playoffs, and then you then go and address the position in the 2026 draft. By all means, you can pick a guy and take a swing in this draft, but if we're going to be realistic, the future lies in that 2026 draft. So trade down this year, get an extra pick in the first round next year. You've got 2 first rounders to go and attack whoever you decide's the guy. But that's about setting the team up to win in this next season. And yeah, we're not talking win Super Bowls, get to the playoffs. That keeps Myles Garrett happy, keeps the rest of the team happy. And if you get him cheap, you're putting more talent. If we're saying to Myles Garrett, actually, we're going to go get Chase Young to play opposite you rather than having Okoronkwo and Maguire because we've freed up all this money, that then appeals. And you can really, really invest in the team. So for me, Kirk Cousins, no-brainer. There's the chemistry of Kevin Stefanski that I think that's why we're talking about him here. If there's not the Kevin Stefanski link, I don't think Kirk Cousins wants to come to Cleveland. But he can say, look, we're going to spend all this money. He's a smart guy. He can chat to Andrew Berry and understand what the plan is for the team. And then also, Kevin can go and get the goods out of him that gets us above average. Yes, it's not elite, but it's above average. And that will do when you're talking about a questionable market outside of Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think you both make good points. As far as landing in Cleveland, the links there with Kwesi in Minnesota, who could kind of give him a nudge. Stefanski, was coaching him when he won his only playoff game. And to your point, Barry, the way the Falcons have used him, like 20th in play action, which is where he's the best. That's clearly where he's best. And he's been like in the top 5 every other stop in his career, with guys that have used him properly. I think that points to a big issue with some of his game this year, plus the Achilles. And it's always the season after the season when a guy kind of gets back. Now he's, pushing 40, so you do have to account for that. But at the same time, I do think there's still some effective football in him. And if the one reason that I think you're keeping Kevin Stefanski more above all, and I like Kevin, but, don't kill me, chat. But, I like Kevin, but I think that the one thing that we know he can do is get elevated play from anybody but Deshaun Watson. We've seen, right? Like he's been able to elevate quarterback play from mediocre guys. And I'm not calling Cousins mediocre, but at this point in his career, maybe so. So no matter who you're bringing in, though, and I think you both made this point, you have to make the position easier than it is this year, right? The offensive line has to be greatly improved. I think there's a conceptual, you brought in all these guys to play wide zone, and then you switch the scheme to match Watson, and now you're running the ball in the middle of the field 69% of the time, and running more power stuff, gap schemes, and duo, and the personnel doesn't match what you're trying to accomplish. You get no push up the middle. So, identify what you want to be offensively in the run game, and then match the personnel on the offensive line to that would be the common sense way of approaching this. Plus, I think you need an elite running back. You need to put as many weapons around the quarterback position, whether it's Cousins, Darnold, or Joe Schmo off the street. It has to be an easier position than what you put Jameis Winston in this year, with no run game at all. So I'm interested in Darnold just because, and I don't think it's feasible, probably, to your point, Jack. But I wrote an article about this. Don't you think the pressure, and I said this before the Myles Garrett thing, so I want to get your guys' thoughts on Garrett's comments too. But the pressure on Barry and Stefanski has ratcheted up to a point where they have to win next year. The only way I see around them not finding a way to keep their jobs without winning would be if they drafted a quarterback high and he showed glimpses of being the guy. I think that would get them another year, right? Like if it looked like they drafted the future. But outside of that, I fail to see them at least having to win 9 games to keep their job next year. Um, and then with the Myles Garrett pressure, excuse me, the Myles Garrett pressure being, his comments this week, which were, I think many have taken out of context, but I don't think they were ever going to rebuild, just to preface this. But either way, it's important to listen to what he's saying. So with that pressure added, where are you guys at with I want to hear your thoughts on Garrett's stuff and if Cousins is enough to win those games. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I would say I've got a Christmas present for everyone that's an OBR VIP subscriber. On Christmas Day, I'm dropping the breakdown on the Darnold deal. So when you wake up Christmas morning, forget those other presents. Forget the kids that you might have to look after that are running around screaming. Pull up the OBR site and have a little read, because there's a breakdown on the what the Sam Darnold deal will be. It's perfectly feasible, but yeah, it comes with other challenges. And one on, if you save all this money on Kirk Cousins, you can spend a little bit more on the backup. And I know a guy that lots of people are excited about that I think's he's a nice bridge quarterback if you're going to draft someone, but not good enough to be your guy for 17 games, is Justin Fields. And so if Justin Fields doesn't get snapped up, he might look at a team like Cleveland and go, actually, I've got a shot to potentially play there, because if Kirk struggles, they might move on. If I go and sit behind Mahomes, Mahomes has to get injured for me to play, whereas Kirk struggles the first 4 weeks, they'll go, look, throw Justin Fields in there. So don't rule out just because they go with Kirk that Kirk's the only route they go. They can easily go, and who knows, they could go all three. They could have Fields. They could even take a quarterback in the first round and go, here's 3 guys. The pressure's on for Myles Garrett. We've got legit options to go and fix this. So you can throw multiple darts at the board, but I didn't read much into the Myles Garrett part. And as I wrote in the forums, I think whatever way you want to read that, you can 100% read it that way. You can read it if he's put them on notice to, this was what everyone was saying anyway. Because if you'd have sat Andrew Berry or Kevin Stefanski down and said, hey guys, are you going to do a rebuild for the next couple of years? They'd say, hell no. And Myles Garrett basically just said, I don't want to be a part of a rebuild, which what player does? What player wants to go, hey, can you just waste the next 2 years of my career? And maybe in 2027, we'll give it a shot. So I didn't really take it any meaning like that. He's under contract for 2 more years. They can then franchise tag him for at least another year. So he's not feasibly going anywhere for 3 years, even if he wanted to. So I think he's just saying to them, put a team around me that can win, and asking for more. And that's a fair ask from a key player. So I think Kirk Cousins, you're in that realm. I think you're in that realm with Sam Darnold. Aaron Rodgers has got the talent, but not the headspace that I think anyone would want him in the dressing room. But I think also at the same time, he's not saying, give me a Justin Fields, give me a fringe guy and go, oh, it might work out. Give me a Jacoby Brissett. I don't think he wants that. He doesn't want what's acceptable. He wants to see a team that can at least get to the playoffs. Myles Garrett's a smart guy. He's not saying it's Super Bowl and bust in 2025. He's saying it's got to be a team that can compete and get to the playoffs. And to get to the playoffs, you've only got to be in 7th best in the AFC. We're not talking about you've got to be winning the division, which is the hardest division in football. You've got to be doing all this. He's being realistic with his ask. So I'm pretty chilled.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what you have to think about this, Barry.
Yeah, I think, Jack's dead on in terms of how people can interpret Miles' comments. Miles has offered up a very reasonable ask, something that I think Barry and Stefanski, the front office, were planning on doing anyway, right? Which is rebuild this team to be competitive in 2025. It's doable from my perspective. There's enough talent on this team to rebuild it to be competitive in 2025. It's what they were incented to do anyway. They were not going to rebuild this team down to the studs. That was a great way to get fired if that's what they were looking to do. They want to hold on to their jobs, so they're going to try to rebuild this team up. That's exactly what Miles was asking them to do. Mostly what it is it's fodder for people with their own agendas out in the media or wherever to interpret Miles' comments however they want to interpret them, right? If you are someone who has an agenda to say this front office is absolutely horrible and needs to be fired, then you can interpret Miles' comments exactly that way, right? And people have certainly gone out and done that. Or if you're like me and sort of saying, well, Miles is advocating the plan that, I think that the front office is going to do anyway, and it just infers a need for stability. That's exactly what I argued in my front page bloviation 2 days ago. So you can take those comments and you can interpret them any way you wish. I view them as very common sense comments for a guy who is about to turn 29 years old, is reaching the peak of his career or has reached the peak of his career and wants to be on a winning team. It's exactly what you would expect him to say as a leader of this team. And I don't find them offensive at all. And I don't find them as a justification for a major change in direction of the franchise. And that's the way that I interpret them. The one thing that's left over from the Kirk Cousins conversation, however, is as I sort of try to reevaluate whether I think he is a good 1-year fit for this team as someone to get us to the franchise quarterback that we will undoubtedly draft because we've had such good success with that in the past, is whether we have the right offensive coordinator in place for a Kirk Cousins offense in Ken Dorsey. And I do think that is something that would require some significant study and evaluation on the part of our front office, because Ken Dorsey, given his history with Josh Allen and given his recent history with Jameis Winston, does seem like a guy who wants to throw the ball 50 times a game. And I do not think that is an approach that would match itself up with Kirk Cousins, and is something that we would want to look at. So I just thought I'd offer that.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it, for sure, Barry. What you do with Dorsey, I tend to think that if Cousins was the guy, they would lean back into Stefanski's, what Cousins has done his entire career. Now, if Dorsey is part of that, I think he probably would be more along for the ride. I've just heard that they have a really good relationship. So I wonder if, what happens there. I agree with you that maybe his play calling isn't ideal. The only thing I would push back on is he hasn't had any run game to go to. So throwing it 50 times and trailing in these games is kind of the only option he's had. Now, that may be partially on him. It's your job to generate the run game and adjust. You are the offensive coordinator. So finding an answer is on you partially. But either way, that's certainly an interesting component. I think Myles Garrett's comments were valid. I think he had, I'm glad he said it. They were never going to rebuild anyways, but I'm glad he said it because it puts it in perspective and it kind of quiets the tear it down crowd, which was driving me a little insane because I don't think that, I don't see that as an option. The only thing I would say is that piqued my interest is he really got into detail about, I want to know who's quarterback and I want to know what the plan is and I want to know this and I want to know that. And that's something that I didn't expect him to hear. You know what I mean? So he has to be okay with the plan. Does that mean you have to run everything past him from here on moving forward? Probably not. But to a certain extent, he's kind of got to sign off at this point, wouldn't you say? With the plan, if you want him to be a part of the future.
They're likely to extend him this offseason, and we're talking somewhere in the 35 It's 35 million I'm looking at the moment because Bosa was 34 off the top of my head. But we could easily have a few more deals done before then, and we're talking about 37, 38. So he's not, quite rightly, going to sign that deal until he's had a good look at what the team is saying, this is what we're going to do. And I think it's more than fair to ask because he's committing the rest of his career at that point. If he's signing 4 more years on top of the 2 he's got, that's 6 more years. So he's going nowhere. He's walking from Cleveland to Canton, maybe via Brooks Park. Depends where the way you see it. But that's what he's saying. And if he's going to commit his future to the team, then why wouldn't you ask that question? You wouldn't sign an extension at a company where everything's falling apart, they're sacking everyone and go, oh yeah, this is where I want to be forever. So he wants to know. And as well, he's probably thinking the same way as if they sack the GM and head coach. And he's probably also like, well, I want to sit down with the new guys before I think anything about my future. Because if you sack them after this season, you're not going to go straight into competing. So you could easily use this Myles Garrett thing as a statement of, you sack these guys, I want out. People don't want to read it that way because that doesn't sell as many clicks, but that is very much in the same realm.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I would love to hear his thoughts on the regime, right? Because a regime change feels like a rebuild, right? Because they're going to want their own guys and they're going to want their own processes. So I would guess he would be against that. Ty Sox asking in the chat, is it in Myles' interest to extend this year to mitigate injury risk? Yes.
Yeah, if I'm going to get what we're talking 100 million guaranteed, then sign that baby. Always do that if you're the player, because if he gets hurt, then he makes the last 20 million this year, and that could be it. Whereas if he guarantees another 100, God knows what mil, that's a nice position to be in.
Any chance this front office falls in love with one of these quarterbacks and wants to go get him?
Certainly could. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we only have to look to, I want to say it's 3 years ago, Malik Willis, where is he going to be picked 3rd in the draft? And he went in the 3rd round, I want to say, in the end. So just because the draft community is hyping these people up and saying this is where we think they're going to go, when there's not a great quarterback class, they could easily trade back and then grab Cam Ward. For however much people say that could never happen now, the draft's a long way away. Let's see where it goes. So I don't expect them to be drafting up and going crazy unless they legit think this guy is it. But we could easily be picking up a quarterback in the 1st round still, because why not? Cubase is going to be an interesting thing to see. So there was a stat Andrew Healy created that was hired under the Sashi Brown era and is still within the building, kind of their like head of analytics. And it was run by Football Insiders. That's now did it merge into ESPN or ESPN? I think they kind of merged into when it got bought out. But hopefully they'll run that piece again. And that's looking at those kind of sort of top handful of quarterbacks and saying, what's the likelihood that they produce well based on what they've produced up to this point? And that's one that if Cubase says they all suck, probably not drafting anyone, but it might surprise us.
Yeah. Thoughts, Barry, on any of the quarterback? Anybody that you are interested in for the Browns?
It just depends on availability, when they're available. If Cam Ward falls into their lap, he's an intriguing guy. But I just really believe in building in the trenches this year. I just am not seeing anyone that I'm in love with, in that 1st round. Like I said, I was singing the praises of Abdul Carter earlier. Maybe if they're able to sign Chase Young, that sort of wipes that out. But the idea of pairing him with Myles Garrett is very, very intriguing to me. if he's still available. We'll see how this draft breaks down, where the Browns wind up getting slotted. But to me, I'm thinking a swing at a quarterback, where it would interest me would be, somewhere in late day 2.
Yeah.
I think is probably the sweet spot for the Cleveland Browns if someone interesting falls into their grasp there. But I've never postured myself as a quarterback expert or draft expert. So I will leave that to Jacob and the others who spend their lives studying that realm.
It's risky business for these guys. They are walking a tightrope, in my opinion, of having to balance the future and having to win this year. And if you don't draft someone high, then you certainly have to find a way to win. Because I think that's your only other way out. So it'll be quite intriguing to see the way they handle it. I think that shoring up the trenches and creating a run game with young running back and some new pieces on the offensive line is step A in trying to make sure that you ensure success for your quarterback. Talking about ensuring success in 2025, it's time to get better with Core Home Fitness. We all make our 2025 declarations of improvement. We're going to be a better man. We're going to be stronger. We're going to be more fit. Core Home Fitness will help you do it. Look up our friends at corehomefitness.com and check out their assortment of lifting equipment, especially their top-rated adjustable dumbbells. New York Times, Men's Health, Best Buy, at Consumer Reports. They are known for these dumbbells. As you can see, the incline bench there that goes flat. They have a number of benches. They make it easy to set up a home gym for you or for a loved one who wants to improve. Makes a great gift this time of year, Christmas, New Year's. It's the time to make that decision to get fit and do so with Core Home Fitness at corehomefitness.com. Check out their videos. Products like the Glute Drive Plus, Fight Master, and crush your goals in 2025. They've got a U.S.-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns. You name it, they know exactly what they're doing. I encourage you to go peruse the site, corehomefitness.com. There's a number of wonderful things there that will help you. It's incredibly interesting, and their stuff is top notch. A home gym, get better in 2025, or improve, make a great gift for somebody. But their award-winning dumbbells are fantastic, and we thank them for sponsoring the OBR pregame, postgame, and OBR weekly. Core Home Fitness.com. Be there or be square, literally. So there you go. All right, gentlemen, there is a game today, despite us talking about all of this stuff. And the game today is with the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a shocking line in the AFC North. I don't think I have seen a AFC North matchup at 9 points against a 6-8 Bengals team all year long. I was blown away by this line at 9 points. The weather today is supposed to be rather nice. 5% precipitation, you can see there, 34 degrees. Not going to be too bad compared to what we've seen around the world in the world of football this week here. We've seen a lot of freezing cold temperatures and idiots like those knuckleheads in Tennessee thinking they're tough, taking their shirts off before the game only to get beat by 40. But interestingly enough, this is the weather forecast. It does not look too bad. there in Cincinnati. But the Browns are going up against an offense that has literally been almost unstoppable with Chase and Burrow. It is just their terrible defense that has cost them the season for the most part. The combination of Chase and Burrow are quite this year, especially quite intimidating, especially when you just have well, I guess they have Emerson back, but you are missing Greg Newsome. You are going to have Cameron Mitchell out there. You're just missing Greg Newsome. Martin Emerson, who has had a tough year returning. This matchup today scares the crap out of me. Denzel has fared well in the past with these guys. But I mean, this has got to be the center of your game plan, right, Barry?
Yeah, if it's up to me, you have Denzel shadow Chase all day. As much as you possibly can. But I think I think the Browns defense keeps the Bengals under control about as much as you can with the Bengals these days. The Bengals running game has improved, which concerns me a bit. They're more of a balanced team than they were when we faced them earlier in this year, but I think we keep them under 30 today. But I don't have much confidence in the Browns game, Browns' ability to score. And I am very concerned about what Trey Hendrickson is going to do to Jermaine Ifedi today. So are you calling for a score prediction now, or is that for later?
Yeah, fire it up. Let's do it.
All right, I'm going to fire it up. I'm going to say it's 24-13 Bengals today. I just don't have much confidence in the Browns' ability to score, unfortunately, with their tuck and run quarterback. Hope I'm wrong. I hope I see a brilliant performance by DTR today, but that's what I'm calling it.
Okay. Casey Kinman pointing out in the chat that it was a 4-point spread before the DTR announcement. Interesting. They saying Jameis is worth 5 points. That's wild. Vegas is wild on that one. Jack, thoughts on the game today? Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, the Chase brothers have combined here to be on a rampage. And of course, Burrow has been fantastic. Despite them only being 6-8. I mean, talk about being frustrated, guys. What if you had an offense that was this dynamic and this good and you still couldn't win games? At least we know that, the offense has room for improvement. Anyways, go ahead, Jack. Thoughts on final score of this game? And I know you do your article every week over at the OBR.com, which I urge you to go to. As one of the best Browns communities in the best Browns community in the world. But go check out who do we need to lose today for Tankathon?
So I'll do that first. So if these 4 games happen, then we move to third in the draft. So Raiders to beat the Jags, they're 1.5-point favorites. Giants to beat the Falcons, they're 8.5-point underdogs, but it's a debut for Penix, so you never know. The Panthers to beat the Cardinals, 4.5-point underdogs, but at the same time, Bryce Young has looked legit good since his return. And Titans to beat the Colts, 3.5-point underdogs, but that's one that late in the season you get some crazier results. So they're ones to keep an eye on. And if all of them happen, that's third. I think you're more realistic to talk about fifth. But if we get fifth in the draft after today, that's good. It gives us 2 more weeks to get a couple more spots higher. But on this game, Joe Burrow is legit playing. I was going to say Hall of Fame, that'd be wrong. MVP level football this season. And it just goes to show that if the team's not good enough around you, doesn't matter how special you are. And when you're a poverty franchise like the Bengals, that's not a great place to be because they've struck gold on a quarterback and that's not enough. And that's got to be frustrating as a fan base. So I wish I'd have been a lot smarter last year. My mind was very much what Casey then confirmed. I think the betting line would have probably been around 3 points underdogs to the Browns. And that line would have shifted out with DTR, I'd say 7 points coming in because I just look at it and go, you've got a proven quantity in Jameis. Yes, it's going to be a bit crazy at times, but you know what you have. Whereas DTR, it could be a bit of a mess. So what I'd have done in the past is I'd have bet that before the news came out, watch the line change, and then cash out and take my money without ever having to watch the game, which is by far my favourite way to bet. I think if you're looking for a betting line, DTR rushing yards is definitely the one to keep an eye on today. But my prediction is Browns 10, Bengals 27. I think it's going to be a bit of a beatdown, but that's perfectly fine. I'm not worried. As I said, individual performances, there's quite a few guys on defense. I'm keen to see what they provide. But let's answer the question on DTR, and we'll hopefully find that out.
Yeah, DTR, Isaiah McGuire, Cameron Mitchell, and Mike Hall Jr., all guys I'm interested in watching. I want to watch the young guys today and continue to evaluate them. Miles Harden, if he gets some play. Let's see how Emerson looks coming off of the injury. He will be tested. And then, I have this one. Staying within a touchdown until late, in Burrow putting one up late in the fourth to go up 2 scores, so 27-17. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that DTR plays better and at least puts up 20 points today in his offensive debut, because I don't think he's had a terribly fair shake so far. So I'm hoping for him to see something. But we've heard all, and this is no offense to anybody's opinion, we've heard a lot of, we know who he is. I don't know that we do yet. So I would like to see some more of him. So looking to enjoy that. Hopefully without the detriment to the wide receiving core, which is making a significant improvement with Jameis Winston. So that would be the downfall, right? If all of a sudden they look terrible. But either way, the Jerry Jeudy move looks fantastic. He's over 1,000 yards, and you continue to build on what you're doing and evaluate your young talent. And as long as they're playing hard and competing, I'd love to see Miles get to his 100th sack today too. That would be huge, right? Get that off of his shoulders. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Go get comfy for this one.
I would just say what you mentioned on the quarterback position and sort of the wide receivers, because if we had potentially gone straight from Winston to, we don't know, from Watson to DTR, we'd probably be sitting here going, their biggest need this offseason is wide receiver. Judy's not looking good. Tillman has been a bust, because if you look back to what he did in the first sort of season and a half before Watson went down with the Achilles, you had nothing. I was like, is he good enough to be wide receiver 3 next year? And now we're like, hey, there's 2 good guys. Do you want to go silly and go for a T. Higgins, Chris Godwin in the last spot? Or we could spend 3, 4, 5 mil and this unit is good enough. So it's one that, as much as people aren't sure about what Winston did, Winston proved us a lot. And I think even if you went for a Kirk Cousins level player, he's good enough that you're going to see that and be able to properly evaluate the entire roster next season. Whereas you go with a Justin Fields, something like that, you're at a point where we might not be able to evaluate anything. Everyone gets fired by week 6, and it's like, what? Great. It's another lost season with no idea what 2026 looks like.
Totally agree. You are watching an Orange and Brown Report production. Make sure you get over to the OBR.com for critical organizational breakdowns. You've got Jack there with the best, the very, very best cat breakdown in all the land, plus all of our guys working hard, working contacts, working all aspects of your Browns as we head into this such a pivotal offseason. And we will break it down for you every step of the way. Don't go anywhere. Keep it locked at the OBR.com. Hit like and subscribe on your way out. The post-game show is at 7 p.m. I will be here. and hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell for the big boss man, Barry McBride, and the capologist, the great one, Jack Duffin. My name is Brad Ward. Thank you for watching the OBR pregame show, and go Browns. We are out.